My name is Doran Harold, and I started translating the Voynich manuscript in October of last year. I decided to approach the text entirely linguistically and logically. My work doesn't rely on any pseudoscience or anything spiritual. It's entirely grounded in academic linguistics. I will be releasing a publication by the end of this month that will be available on my Substack. I was also on the TLB podcast talking about some of my findings earlier this year. I'd like to reiterate that I'm not a Voynich expert by any means. I started working on this less than a year ago. There are people that have dedicated their whole lives to this work. After the podcast was released, I was chewed up by a lot of these Voynich experts, and I'd like to address some of the criticism. Firstly, I'm not entirely certain if my translation constitutes as a substitution cipher. That was one of the questions that came up multiple times, is whether or not it's a substitution cipher. Because I entered the text syntactically and was looking at what the text actually looks like in terms of the script, I went down the Lepontic route. There is evidence to suggest that this isn't entirely a substitution cipher. My work so far could provide evidence for the theory, the Italo-Celtic theory, which is still just a theory, but I believe some of my work can provide evidence of this theory. I definitely recommend looking into the Italo-Celtic publications that have been made in the last 10 years. At the end of this video, I'm also going to show a bit of my publication with the lexicon. One of the criticisms also that came up was in regards to language entropy. My knowledge on language entropy when I did the podcast was pretty limited and has since expanded quite a bit. In fact, a large part of my research and work right now is nullifying a publication that Yale released in regards to language entropy within the Voynich. In the podcast, I mainly focus on the Irish fada as being the main element that disrupts a lot of the previous research that's been done in regards to entropy within the Voynich. However, there are several other elements that I didn't include in the podcast, like suffixes, prefixes, abbreviations, and supposed phonetics that exist within the language that also influence the entropy. One of the major criticisms was my suggestion that Christine de Pizan could have authored this text along with her scribes, and I totally understand the criticism there. I want to reiterate that I don't definitively say it was her, I just provide a substantial amount of evidence. Not only does her timeline fit, her geographical location, her experience, her familial ties, her motive. I want to talk about her motive for a second. Out of anyone that has ever been suggested to have written this text, Christine de Pizan has the most motive to want to encrypt her work. And if you're familiar with her work, you would understand why. I also did not invent her mother. There's virtually no information on her mother anywhere to be found. That's what I talk about. There's virtually no information. So we can suggest things. That's all I was doing, was providing a suggestion. Let's take a look at my lexicon. A linguist friend of mine who's really great, who actually invented his own language, helped me with the organization of my examples. Here we have the English word first, the actual script, and below the Irish word that it's connected to. The blue highlighted letters or characters have inferred or supposed phonetics involved, and they're usually vowels. As you can see with the word twist and redivides, the R actually slices through another character, making an abbreviated character. It is not one character, it is two separate characters that are combined. And again, the R slices through. It's very organic and intuitive. The suffix for INN, AN, EANN, which all sound the same in Irish, is the G looking character, which is at the end of twist and at the end of trading, at the end of presses and at the end of branches. It is also used as a diminutive suffix to make something small, little branch as opposed to big branch. And in this example, you can also see the fada at play. The fada is used at the end of the word for branch. It's used to provide an accent to the O sound. The fada is also used as a standalone in the word for holes. However, there's an inferred vowel that precedes it. The most common word in the entire text is actually at the end. It's a suffix to this wholes word, and it denotes dually or of to or secondly. I describe a lot of the characters as being cuffed or uncuffed, and it's very logical the way the characters are organized in terms of Irish phonetics. Not all of the characters directly correspond to the Lepontic alphabet. However, many of them do loosely connect to the visual syntax of that alphabet, and that was my jumping off point. A lot of the characters are also extremely logical and intuitive in terms of what they represent sound-wise phonetically. There is plenty of evidence to suggest that many different languages can be used to access a translation from this text. However, in my research in the last year, I have found that Old Irish and Irish provide the most accurate translation from this text. And what do I mean by accurate? I mean, I'm getting back literal taxonomy of plants, instructionals, literal descriptions of what is actually physically being depicted on the page, recurring motifs and themes within the text that are logical and poetic. I often vacillate between feeling like I'm crazy and all of this is in my head and needing to seek out evidence, seek out confirmation that my theories are true, to receiving that confirmation and that validation and feeling briefly like Harriet the Spy or something. And I vacillate between these two states. So it's been kind of a tumultuous experience working on this in the last year. I've received enough confirmation and evidence and validation that I've felt the need to share it with others. I'm not one to gatekeep at all, and I understand fundamentally that translation is a communal art. So yeah. That's all I have for you right now. Keep up with my work. My publication will be released on Substack. My Substack is blessed_but. That should be released by the end of this month. My work has also been entirely documented on GitHub, which I'll be releasing some of that as well. I hope this inspires you and encourages you to do your own research and your own translation. You're welcome to use my lexicon. It's a great jumping off point if you want to learn Irish.